speaker is going to be talking about Islamic banking solutions, and that's Othman Abdullah, who is the CEO of Islamic Banking and Innovative Services at Silver Lake Group. A round of applause for him.
Thank you. Good morning. So let's get it a bit alive after the break, yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Joy? Okay, let me get my slide is ready. I'm given 20 minutes to speak about this topic, which I find it very challenging. Before I start, a bit about myself, Othman. I've been with Silver Lake for the past 22 years. I think when Paul introduced Silver Lake in the morning, he never mentioned a word about Malaysia. Yeah, Silver Lake was founded in Malaysia in 1989. Yeah, that's where I am from. I'm from Kuala Lumpur. I live in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, early year 2000, I think around 2003, Silver Lake was listed in Singapore Stock Exchange. So our public listed entity is actually in Singapore, but our head office is really in Kuala Lumpur. Me and a few other colleagues from Kuala Lumpur are here to join you. Our colleagues from various continents, yeah, some of them that I have never even personally met. We've been liaising via email, and of course, I'm really glad to be able to speak to all of you. Given the topic to talk about Islamic banking solution for 20 minutes is really challenging. So before I start, can I just have a show of hand? Who among you have got any exposure on Islamic banking finance at all? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I know our brothers from Maldives, they have got Islamic window, our colleagues. And the two hands on the other side, where are you from? Are you from Kenya or from some other places? Kenya. Which bank is that? Dubai Islamic Bank. Okay, so two of you are from Dubai Islamic Bank. Okay, great. And we also have First Community Bank and Gulf African Bank here, right? These are Islamic, right? Okay, great. So to prepare for all of you who do not have any exposure on Islamic banking and finance, I have prepared a very brief overview. Okay. Okay. Are they here? Yeah. Okay. Great.
And a few other banks have Islamic banking products.
Great. Okay. Happy to hear that. Okay. So now, for the benefit of all of you who do not have any exposure on Islamic banking and finance, I have prepared a very brief overview. Okay. Let me start off with a global view of Islamic finance. Yeah. So the top part are really historical information. I'll come back to that later. But what I would like to basically impress upon you is that this Islamic banking here, we are talking about a $1 trillion industry. Yeah? It's not something small. It's basically a $1 trillion industry. If you look at that 1.8 trillion, this is actually my old slide. I've just Googled, just before we start just now, actually the value now is 2.4, and it is expected to surpass 3 billion by 2020, 3 trillion by 2020. Yeah? And we have got Sukuk. So Sukuk is actually Islamic version of bond. So by the way, a bit of introduction on Islamic banking. Typically in Islamic banking and finance, you will come across a lot of Arabic words. Yeah? And Sukuk is basically an Arabic word of bond, an Islamic version of bond. And we have got this Islamic funds, and we also have Takaful. And Takaful is basically the Islamic version of insurance. Yeah? So when we talk about the Islamic finance, we talk about banking, we talk about funds, we talk about Sukuk, we talk about Takaful. Yeah, it's basically a complete picture of Islamic banking and finance. So first modern Islamic bank really started off in Africa actually. It was in Egypt, yeah, back in 1963. But however, due to political reason, it was closed down and it was acquired by a conventional bank. Of course, I'm from Malaysia, so I need to talk about Islamic banking in Malaysia a little bit. We started off Islamic banks in Malaysia in 1983. For the first 10 years in Malaysia, there was only one Islamic bank, which was the Bank Islam of Malaysia. But from 1993, we have got a dual banking system. So in Malaysia, just like in Kenya today, you have got a conventional bank and Islamic bank running in parallel. Yeah? So we call this dual banking system. Sometimes you also come across the national interest-free banking. So sometimes people call Islamic banking as interest-free banking. And even in some jurisdictions, like Turkey, for example, they call participatory banks. Yeah, participatory banking. So you've got Islamic banking, you've got interest-free banks, you've got participatory banking, or sometimes you may hear the word of Sharia banking. Yeah, Sharia. So what is Sharia? Sharia is Islamic law. So Islamic banking and finance follow the law of Islam, which is actually called Sharia. Yeah. Okay. So that is actually so much on the global view of Islamic finance. So we are in Africa. Again, Islamic bank and finance is actually not new in Africa. So I already mentioned to you earlier that it started off in Egypt in 1963, Gamma Bank. But if you look at, I think you all know that in Africa, you have got a sizable number of Muslim population. Yeah? Based on the literature review that I read, it's about 250 million. Even though Islamic banking and finance is not a banking and finance for Muslims only, but naturally, this big sizable population in Africa, it provides a natural demand for the Islamic banking and finance. And The Economist, back in 2017, has identified Africa as the new frontier of Islamic banking and finance. Yeah? Africa as the new frontier of Islamic banking and finance. As of now, based on what I also gathered from the literature, there are more than 50 fully fledged Islamic banks. So when we say fully fledged Islamic bank, it means the bank only offers Islamic banking and finance products and services. And there are also significant number of Islamic banking window. So when we say Islamic banking window, it means the conventional bank that offers Islamic banking product and services as a window business, right? So meaning that this particular bank provide both conventional and Islamic banking product and services. So if you look at this recent Islamic finance development in Africa, this is my busy slide with all these various African countries here. Most of them are basically really tapping on the sukuk market. Yeah? So they are basically Islamic finance money. For your information, in this whole world, we are having challenge that there's not enough Islamic banking asset for those Islamic banks in Asia and in the Middle East. They do have Islamic banking funds, but they do not have enough place to invest the money. Actually putting a lot of fund for the infrastructure improvement of African country. Yeah? So this is a bit of a development in Africa. Being in Kenya, it is only natural for me to touch on a bit on the Islamic finance in Kenya. Yeah, again, in Kenya, Islamic banking is not new. If we look at this, okay, my brothers and sisters from Kenya, please correct me if I'm wrong. So actually, the Islamic banking started in Kenya in 2006. Yeah, and the first was, according to the literature, Barclays Bank of Kenya was the first bank to introduce Sharia-compliant banking product on a window basis. That's right. And subsequently, you have got full-fledged Islamic Bank, which is the first community bank, Gulf African Bank, and also Dubai Islamic Bank, and some other banks that you mentioned just now. Okay, and this is what interests me, that Kenya have got this first community-owned finance institution, Kenya first and only Sharia-compliant saving and credit cooperative organization. And I'm proud to also know that Kenya is actually working towards becoming a regional hub for the Islamic finance in Africa. Yeah? So this is basically news, that Kenya, at the government level, is working on putting on all the necessary infrastructure, amending the necessary legislation to basically position Kenya as the regional hub for Islamic banking and finance. And if you look at this part here, these are basically the prospects of Islamic finance in Kenya. And I am particular of interest on the fintech because I have been a follower of fintech. I actually also speak on fintech at various conferences and seminars. And we always refer to M-Pesa, which is basically a trademark of Kenya when it comes to fintech solution. And Kenya, I'm not sure whether it has been launched or not, but what I understand, Safaricom and Islamic Bank, Gulf African Bank, has already planned to launch M-Sharia, which is a Sharia-compliant banking service through M-Pesa. My brothers and sisters from Kenya, has this been launched? M-Sharia? Not yet, yeah? But the plan is there. Okay, so again, this is basically going to provide a lot of opportunities. As we know today, I think if you read the promotional material that I mentioned in there, that African, being a very fintech-driven countries, without having legacies, you can immediately leapfrog, just like M-Pesa, to become the digital provider of Islamic financial services. This is where it is basically how you can position yourself. We are in Asia, in the Middle East, we are already quite advanced when it comes to Islamic banking and finance. But unfortunately or fortunately, these are the traditional way of doing banking and finance, although a lot of banks are already putting in all the digital initiative. So I foresee that, you know, in Africa, in Kenya, and other parts of Africa, you can always position yourself as the digital provider of Islamic financial services. Okay. So, have you got a bit of introduction information about Islamic banking and finance now? Okay? Okay. So, my real job to come here is basically to talk about the technology for Islamic banking and finance. Okay. Now, so I've given you the overview of the global view of Islamic finance. I already mentioned about the African opportunity of Islamic finance. I mentioned about Kenya. So, maybe some of you ask, what is really the difference between conventional bank and Islamic bank? As far as the banking model is concerned, they are exactly the same, right? They are exactly the same. They've got branches, they've got current account, they've got saving account, they've got loans, I put quote and quote, loans, okay? They've got credit card services, they've got treasury, they've got trade finance. So whatever the product of conventional bank, Islamic bank has it. But what is really the key difference is that Islamic banking transaction, they must observe these 4 major prohibitions in Islamic finance. So what are the major prohibitions? The first one, which is very important because later on I'm going to talk about the system aspect of it, the prohibition of interest or usury. For you bankers, maybe you ask me, if this is prohibited, then how does bank make money? I'll speak on it on the next slide. This is the first prohibition of Islamic banking. Then there are other prohibitions here like the avoidance of uncertainty. So what it means is that when bank and customer enter into a relationship, signing into contract, there cannot be uncertainty. The contract has to be very certain. For example, if you're taking a mortgage, you have to be very certain at the end of the mortgage term what you are paying to the bank. So this is what we call prohibition of uncertainty. You have to be very certain. The other one will be avoidance of gambling. For Islamic financial services, product and services, they cannot enter into a gambling. Of course, they cannot finance the gambling business, but as far as the product is concerned, as far as the services is concerned, they cannot also come up with a product that is ended up with zero-sum game with the customer, right? It has to be a product that does not have any gambling component, right? So these are the 4 major prohibitions of Islamic banking and finance, but otherwise, Islamic banking and conventional banking, they are still the same, okay? The product will still be the same, but they will observe these 4 major prohibitions. So if you look at the 2, 3, and 4, this is not so much on the system aspect of it, but if you look at the first prohibition of interest or usury, this has got a major impact to the system. Because how you then compute the interest as opposed to whatever the income that the bank can earn from the customer, basically there will be a component, key component on the prohibition of interest here that need to be incorporated into the system aspect of it. Next. So again, just now the question. So if the Islamic bank is prohibited to charge interest to the customer, how does the bank make money? This is actually the most very important part. So what makes it different between conventional and Islamic is basically the nature of contracts. Yeah? So the contractual obligation of a customer when you enter a contract with a bank, it basically depends on any one of these contracts. Okay? So for example, we identify as contract of exchange, contract of user fraud, contracts of partnership, contract of security, contract of graduates. So for example, under the contract of exchange, based on buying and selling, there will be a trading element. So for example, when you want to own a house, so what you do in conventional, the bank will loan you money for you to buy the house, charge you interest, right? But in Islamic banking, if you go by the contract of exchange, by the way, this is not the only way of doing mortgage in Islamic. It can be other ways. But if we are doing mortgage on the contract of exchange, for example, under this murabaha concept, what the bank will do, they will buy the house from the developer, then they will sell the house to you. So when they sell the house to you, because the bank has got a lot of money, they will buy the house in cash, right? So let's say $1 million. So they will buy the house in cash, $1 million. They will sell the house to you in installment basis with a deferred margin. So probably, because you are going to repay the bank in 15 years, so they will basically sell back to you at 1.5 million, for example. They buy for 1 million, they sell to you 1.5 million. So the 1.5 million here provide the certainty, right? And how then you basically pay back to the bank over the 15 period, so there will be terms and conditions of the payment, right? So the income that the bank will make from the customer then will be from the margin. The margin. That is if you are using buying and selling contract of exchange. You can also do mortgage, as also already happened in Middle East countries and Asian countries, on the contract of lease, for example. The bank will buy the house from the developer, the bank will lease the house to you. So you stay in the house, you pay rental to the bank. So then the rental will basically have a component that the bank will actually earn income from you. So that is basically the contract of lease and so on. There can be a contract of partnership. So the bank and the customer will partner. So they will invest into a business. When the business generates return, the return will be shared with the customer. So these are basically the mechanism how the bank makes money from Islamic banking product and services. Yeah. So I hope that you're really clear now. So yes, interest is prohibited, but doesn't mean Islamic Banking and Finance is a charity organization. They have to make money. They are a business entity. So how do they make money? According to the contract that they enter with the customer, then they will make income according to the contractual relationship. Clear? All right. Good. Next. Now the system aspect of it. By the way, Joy, you time me, yeah? Okay, got 20 minutes, so I'm not really sure how much time I've taken. Okay, sorry? Oh my God, okay. All right, so this is how we see banking and finance IT solution, yeah? This is how we see it. So if you look at, we have got this here, what we call it 3 rings layer here. The middle, the innermost layer here, we call it the product, the core, yeah? The core layer is really where you define your product and services. Okay, so in a bank, you have got saving account, you've got loan account, you've got trade finance, you've got treasury, you define it in the core, right? And we have got this middle layer here, we call it core, a complementary of core, which is we call it fulfillment or delivery, right? So what is the example of fulfillment and delivery? You can have your internet banking, you can have your branch system, you can have mobile banking, right? So this is what we call the fulfillment and delivery. Okay? And we also take into consideration the latest fintech innovation, because in the past, bank monopolized the transaction, but nowadays you've got the third party, you've got these fintech companies that also provide the services. But they are still really, for example, work hand in hand with the bank. So we identify them as social community innovation. For example, payment, PayPal, for example. Yeah? You may have a PayPal account to basically transact, to make payment, right? But eventually when you receive payment, don't you transfer it to your bank? You do, right? So basically, really, PayPal basically is working hand in hand with the bank. So we also identify this layer. Yeah. So why do I explain to you about all these things? Okay. The reason is because in my next slide. So when we talk about Islamic banking and finance here, we are talking about the impact of the layer of the system that is impacted by Islamic banking and finance is actually the core layer, right? Because as I mentioned to you just now, there is a contractual relationship between the customer and the bank. Right? So that is, for example, the way you do your saving account in Islamic is different from conventional. You do not give interest-based saving. What you do, you may do a safe custody, for example. You do not give fixed deposit on interest, for example. Yeah? So all of those things are basically the core business of the bank. But when it comes to the fulfillment and delivery, there is no such thing as Islamic internet banking. There's no such thing as Islamic internet banking. There's no such thing as Islamic ATM. There's no such thing as Islamic mobile banking, right? So as far as the fulfillment and delivery layer is concerned, that is common. That's why we in Silver Lake, we have been very successful in basically servicing our customer, because we basically look at where there is an impact to Islamic finance and where they are basically common layer. So we leverage basically on the system. So as far as the channel, as far as the delivery is concerned, we basically share common module, okay? But when it comes to the core, this is where there is a distinct differences between conventional Islamic, so we basically manage in the core. So likewise in the social community innovation, basically we also do not do anything because it's really a common layer, okay? So if at all, if you would like to remember after this session, please remember this session, okay, how we basically looking at banking and solution, right? Basically core, delivery, and the social community, and where it's basically impacted by the Islamic, yeah, okay. Then basically my time is out. This is basically the partner of choice that we have. These are the various institutions that we have basically implemented Islamic in Brunei, Singapore, Bangladesh, Pakistan, UAE, Saudi, Algeria, Indonesia, and of course, you know, being very strong in Malaysia. Okay, so these are basically the bank. All right, and just a quick on the case study. This bank, Islam of Brunei, has been our partner for a very long time, and we have basically helped the bank. They have been winning a lot of awards, for example, as the best online mobile initiative. We also have basically helped them with the paperless branch sales and service. We also have basically helped them to win this ASEAN Technology Financial Award 2016, and this bank is actually from number 3 bank in Brunei, is now number 1 bank in Brunei. Yeah, okay, and I just want to leave you with this, that we, as introduced by Maurice earlier, we are basically the winner of Global Islamic Finance Award for 3 years in a row now, 2016, 17, and 18. We have been identified as the best global best Islamic solution provider. So thank you very much. Do reach out to us if you would like to know more about our Islamic banking services. Okay, my colleagues in this region will assist me, okay, but we will definitely be helping them when it comes to the core product and services, how to make it Islamic and non-Islamic, what are the sensitivity and what are okay to be shared, right? With that, I thank you very much. Thank you for listening.